Moran here with Senior Housing Forum, and I am today, I'm so excited about this, by the way. I'm talking to Alison, you better do your last name or I'm going to butcher it.
I can do it. Fragale.
Fragale?
Fragale.
Okay. And Alison is a professor in the, well, I'm going to let you talk about who you are. I'm going to punt to you and make this a lot easier on me.
Sure. So I'm an organizational behavior professor. I am at the University of North Carolina in the business school there. I have been there for 15 years. I also do have a leadership development firm where I do corporate training and speaking, where we try to bring the science of psychology to practitioners to help them think about how do we use everything we understand about people to help people do their jobs more effectively, more efficiently.
Well, and you live a traveling life, right? I know, because we're talking about women's issues. If you don't mind, I want to talk a little bit about you talk about where you live, and you got a family and kids, and it's remarkable.
Yeah. So my husband and I, we have 3 kids. We lived in California, and then we moved to North Carolina in 2004 for me to take my faculty job. And my husband quit his job and followed me and developed his own career there in finance. And he started his own firm in North Carolina. But then he had an offer for his firm to be purchased from a firm in Chicago, and for him to come work for them. And that was very appealing because my husband is a Chicago native. And in fact, all 3 of our kids are actually named after Chicago athletes. So that gives you a sense of my husband's deep love of Chicago. And so it was his dream to come back, and it was a good career opportunity for him. But it put a big question mark for my career. And so I said it was the right decision for on every dimension except the question mark of what that would mean for me professionally. So I said, let's do it. So we did, and I wasn't sure what I would do, and I was tenured at the university at the time. And I said, well, let me try commuting and see what that looks like. And so I do. Some of that involves traveling to North Carolina. Others trips involve going to clients that are, it could be anywhere in the world. But that is my life. And so my husband and I frequently will pass each other in the airport as one person is coming and one person is going. And so I take it 1 year by year, but I'm 3 years into doing that. And so far, so good.
Well, and Chicago is probably as good as it gets in terms of being in the sort of in the middle of the country with great access. So you probably don't have to do a lot of plane changes, which is something I struggle with here in Sacramento. So I can't go any place without changing planes.
That's right.
So the point of this conversation is you've got some serious expertise on women in the workplace and expertise. Just for sort of readers, watchers background, I met Alison through Adam Grant, and we had a conversation prior to this one, and I was just completely blown away by what she knows and her expertise. And so we're going to just we've talked about some topics we're going to talk about, and we're going to kind of dig into it. So the first one I want to actually go into is there a real power imbalance? Why does it exist? How do you fix it if it's there? What do you do about that?
Yeah. So, and by power imbalance, you mean talking about differences between women and men?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think it's real. The other thing I do want to say, though, just as a disclaimer, or just something for everybody to keep in mind, is we're here talking about gender differences. And I'm definitely more versed in talking about those things, but there's nothing I can say about women that couldn't also be said to a greater degree about differences in race, for example. And so if we look at the challenges that women have, the documented evidence or the challenges, for example, that Black men and women have are even greater than the challenges that white women have. And so just as a disclaimer to think about, this idea is not a unique phenomenon to women. But yeah, I mean, if you just look at the statistics that often get quoted about the wage gap, which has improved for white women relative to white men over the past 20 years, it has not for Black men and Black women. But when, there's a wage gap. There's the one that always really gets me is the one on retirement savings. That women's retirement savings are about half of those of men, in part because retirement savings are driven by wages. So there's those kind of pieces of evidence, but there are also obviously the opportunity gaps and the fact that you see that men are more well represented than women and in high levels of leadership. I think those things are real. why do they exist? That's a really complicated question. And I think if we understood that, I don't think there's a single why. I think it's some sets of biases and norms and beliefs and things that we have, and some preferences that people have as well. But I think the question probably where we can be the most productive is just like, how do we start to tackle that? What do we do about it? I don't think that has a single answer either. But one of the things that, struck me when you and I chatted was that when you reached out, you and I have this mutual connection to Adam Grant, and that your original thought was that it wouldn't be normal or right for two men to get on a video and talk about what do we do to be advocates for women. And there's actually research on that, that men in general believe on average that there should be more opportunities for women, but that they don't feel licensed to speak up or be an advocate for those beliefs. And the psychological reason is this idea of needing to have standing to be an advocate. That in order to be somebody who stands up and raises their hand and says, this is a problem that shouldn't happen anymore, people feel like they need to have some self-interest in that. And so if it's for a group to which you do not belong, and we see this, right, with groups with race or sexuality or gender, that it's hard to figure out how to be an advocate or an ally when you're not part of that group. And so research has actually documented that. So I think one of the challenges that we have is that we have a lot of people who privately believe things should change, but the people who are in the majority, the men, don't really know how to talk about that or to have a voice in that. And so when I talk to organizations, and this is how I got into this, was as a female academic, if people want to do something about women's leadership and development in their organization, they're likely to reach out to women professionals. So I was getting a lot of requests. And one of the things I said was, we can't change this if the only thing we do is bring women in to talk to rooms that are full of other women. You have to do it in a way where you bring women in to talk to men and say, how is the majority going to be an advocate for the rest of the group? But anyway, I just really like this research done by a colleague of mine at UNC that says men want to help and they don't feel like they have standing to help. And I think that that's really right.
Yeah. And I think, speaking personally, I think often we sort of two parts to that. We don't know how to help, and we're, frankly, we're terrified that we're going to do it wrong and make it worse rather than better. And so conversations like this, I think, ultimately make that better, right?
Absolutely, right? Is to have the dialogue, because everybody wants to be helpful in the best way that they can, but we encounter all kinds of domains where we don't know the right thing to say or we don't know the right thing to do, and so we do nothing. And I think that's what this is about, which is who has the right to stand up, and the research showing that making men feel like that it's their privilege and their obligation to be able to say, if I want to improve the outcomes for any group, we need to actually be part of the conversation. We can't just have whatever group is in the low power position try to improve their circumstances working alone.
Well, in some sense, and again, this is one of those places where I'm going to wade into where I feel like I'm wading into quicksand. In some sense, for women really to get ahead, men have to be a part of the conversation, because at least today there's this big power imbalance where women need men to be better sponsors, right? So if it's only women, which is kind of where I was going when I first called you, then that power imbalance really continues.
That's right. And I think that men can be sponsors, but I also when I talk to women's groups, I say it's amazing to have a group of like-minded people, because we get a lot of social identity and help through similar others. At the same time, if we look at networking, the worst kind of network to have, of man, woman, anybody, is a network of all people who look just like you, because then the network isn't very useful. And so what I tell women and men is, and this is particularly for women, you need to have some men in your network. You need to have some people who are not like you, who do things differently, who might have a different approach than you. And you need to figure out everything about how they do what they do and learn from them. And so that kind of, our networks need to be more diverse. And one way they can be more diverse, and I say, don't put this squarely on men too. one of the things I do when I advocate for, when I talk to women is, like, take everything in your life that you can control and control it to the best of your ability. So go build your network, go make some strategic relationships with people who are different than you, including different in gender, and deliver value to those relationships so that those people will deliver value to you.